Hey everyone, this is Andres Payan Estrada, curator of public engagement at Craft Contemporary. We're going to be going live and shortly with Cammie Staros, who's one of the artists that's part of our current ceramic exhibition. We're just going to go ahead and wait a little bit for her to log on, and we can go ahead and get this started. Thank you all so much for joining us. Let's see. Hey, hey Cammie,
Hi. Oh,
how are
does
you
that
doing?
not work if my phone's sideways?
Oh no, I guess it didn't.
Okay. I have to figure it out so that I can also have my headphones attached to the bottom of it.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this.
Totally. Let's see. So there's still a few folks kind of joining us.
Sure.
But yeah, so for those of you that are just joining us, my name is Andres Payan Estrada, and I'm the curator of public engagement at Craft Contemporary. So part of some of the programming that we're going to be working on, and that we have been working on for these past couple of weeks has been kind of like online and social and digital engagement. And part of that are going to be these conversations that we're going to be staging every Friday for the next, I believe, like 5 Fridays, where we're going to be doing kind of these one-on-one, kind of very more casual, informal conversations with artists that are part of our The Body, the Object, the Other exhibition. And today we're really happy to have Cammie Staros, who's part of the current exhibition. And just to give you a little bit of info, so these are all going to be part of an initiative that we have called Clay Away, which is kind of like both clay that's been far away from you, but also people who continue to work and are working away on clay. So thank you so much. And so Cammie Staros, who's here with us today from her studio, is an LA-based artist. She is currently part of our ceramic biennial, The Body, the Object, the Other. And Cammie Staros, she received her Bachelor of Arts in Arts and Semiotics from Brown University, and she also graduated from with the Master of Fine Arts from the California Institute of the Arts, CalArts, in 2011, which I was really excited to learn when I was sort of looking at your work, since I too am a graduate from CalArts. And she has exhibited her work extensively in solo and group shows, has been an artist in residence at the Center for Contemporary Ceramics at Cal State Long Beach, and the Headless Center for Arts, and also in Anderson Ranch, and recently was also named 2020 Guggenheim Fellow. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you so much for allowing us and welcoming us to your studio today. It's very nice to be interacting
Yes,
within digital spheres.
I know. Welcome. One day you should come back and we can
Absolutely.
have a follow-up in person. But until
Totally.
then, it's nice to have you virtually here.
Absolutely. And I wore this shirt in honor of some of the color palettes that we
I
see in some of your
appreciate
work.
your red clay shirt very much.
um, but yeah, so we are opening this to some questions from the audience, that our social media manager is gonna be helping us keep track of. So thank you, Simran, who's logged in right now as well, who's gonna help us out a little bit with that. So if any of you at any point that are kind of tuning in want to ask a question, we would be welcome to kind of answer that. As I mentioned, we're kind of taking this pretty casual, lo-fi way of getting to know someone through online. But yeah, let's get started. Cammie, could you tell us a little bit about what you're up to, a little bit about your work?
Yeah. So a lot of my work is clay, but not all of it. And likewise, a lot of it is based in references in the Greco-Roman antiquity world and also the sort of institutional framework of those antiquities. So what I mean by the framework is a lot of the more recent stuff is increasingly incorporating materials that I associate with like conventions of display and especially sort of museological tropes. So kind of the like work that references especially Greek like black and red figure bases. So the amphora with the patterns on tops and bottoms, and the traditional ones have the figures sort of telling allegories and myths and stuff. Mine have nary a figure on them. But so a lot of my work references those, and I use it kind of as a metonym for the Western canon. I think that those pieces have come to represent kind of an origin story of Western art history. So to me, it's sort of like going to the heart of this idea of historical work. But something else I'm interested in about them is that they're very recognizable, but individual pieces aren't that recognizable. And so I can reference like tropes and patterns without it being so much of a reference to specific artworks. So I mean, I work in lots of ways, and sometimes the references to that whole sort of like constellation of ideas is very specific, and sometimes it's much more tenuous. And likewise, there are other references to other like eras and localities and traditions to sort of like conflate and question and confuse sort of the idea of visual influence and even like a linear idea of history.
And when you start talking about sort of like this ideas of like both like perhaps like a metaphor or a metonym of how these are sort of like functioning visually, there, for those of you that are joining us, there are kind of like this very striking relationships of both visually through like the form, but then also more aesthetic representations of either like the black and the red or some figures or some things that you're grabbing from. I remember, I think it was a couple of months ago, and any of you might have experienced this whenever you're going through sort of like these historic sort of sections at museums at like the Met or the Louvre, and you sort of come across a lot of these figures. I remember I even took a photo of some of those, and I think I DM'd them to you.
Which is my favorite thing. People do it all the time, and I like love that I figured out how to like send these tendrils out into the world and get people I like and admire to send me photos of work I like and admire all the time. So
yeah, no, it's so exciting, especially with some of the new work that you're doing, because you're starting to combine also the museological displays more directly into the form that the sculpture actually takes. So they start becoming these kind of like hybrids of both museological display and form and piece, but that are actually concurrently one single thing. Let's see, somebody had this question for us. Does the institution have to do with an origin story?
Well, it has to do with it being sort of canonized, I think. And so it's, I think that to me, like placing it as an origin story is interesting, partly because they often depict origin stories, right? They like depict Greek myths and stuff. And so it feels very like neat and circular in a way. But it's also just chronologically, it's often sort of pinpointed as this like moment in Western art history in particular, where advances in art made great leaps. But of course, the Greeks borrowed a lot from Egypt and China, and it didn't actually start there. But it's often sort of told that way. And that's kind of what I mean. And it's the telling itself in some ways that I mean is institutionalized, but But I do think that that's reiterated by museums, and I'm especially interested in the sort of like quote unquote encyclopedic museum model, but also in like institutions of education, you know, in the sort of art history 101 class. And I really like about the history that I reference, again, that it's very recognizable, that people who think they don't know much about art history still recognize it, and that it has that it's sort of iconic in its historical like setting in a way.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we were really interested in, both Holly Jerger, who I think joined us, is in the conversation as well.
Hi, Holly.
Right now. We were really interested in kind of like digging a little bit into that and sort of like these ideas of sort of like origin stories, but then also the position of museums in terms of like representation and artists and what work gets to be exhibited and why. And with the exhibition, The Body, the Object, the Other, in which I'm going to quickly plug our designer Simran with this beautiful catalog. One of the things that we were kind of really interested in this as part of like the thought processes within the exhibition was these ideas of representation, but representation through kind of like both artists that are very directly critiquing the systems of representations and what stories are being told by who within sort of museum and exhibitions of both contemporary and historical. And then also artists like you who are kind of deconstructing some of these ways that historically art and some of these objects have been represented or framework or contextualized. And I've always been really interested in sort of these Greco-Roman sort of vessel forms and stuff like that because of the imagery that they actually represent. And even going to the Getty Villa, I've always sort of like get really giddy because like the representation of the female body and the female form and homoeroticism and all these things are kind of like all wrapped into these vessels that we hold so precious.
Yeah, I mean, despite the fact that I don't depict similar imagery on mine, the imagery is in many ways what pulled me into those objects as points of interest and as references in my work. I had already been working at Cal Arts. Like my thesis work there was largely about reinvesting these like visual systems of communication. And I was looking at the time, like especially systems of measurement that are seen as like rarefied or reified and like cold and calculated and objective. But a lot of systems of measurement actually come from the body as the initial point of departure. And so I was sort of like reinvesting those with their bodily origins on some level. And in many ways, I'm very interested in this kind of, you know, for a long time, I've been really interested in language and systems of representation and the ways that they depict the body, but also just like interact with the body in other ways. And so it was in fact the ways that that figures were used in black and red figure vases that initially sort of like pulled me in and made me realize that I kept like looking to all these outside places for systems of visual representation, you know, and really sort of like bonked me over the head with this, like, you are an artist, like art itself is its own sort of visual system of representation. So that's kind of like, and I was interested in how the bodies on those vases really got like flattened into this like legible, codified system that you can, you know, you can sort of tell what's going on without knowing the like intricacies of the story of Achilles or whatever it's depicting. And that sort of like flattening the body or like using the body almost as like pictograms, I thought was really interesting. And like I said, pulled me in, but my reaction to it was to never depict bodies online.
But it's also interesting because, and we have a few questions, which we'll get to in a moment. Mostly people want to see what you got going on in the studio. But it was also interesting to me, kind of like the way that there is kind of like the absence of that more formal depiction of a body. But through some of the work that you've been doing, there are kind of these very like elegant cutting gestures into how you do represent a body in some of these works, as like the whale head. Right, right. And so I was gonna ask you if you could show us around a little bit what's going
Sure.
on
I
in
mean, I can
in your
try.
studio.
We'll see how
Yeah,
this
totally.
goes.
And then before, as we do that, I also wanted to show this kind of such beautiful moment that you have included in this
Oh,
piece of
thanks.
that piercing and kind of and this kind of like interaction between both of these two pieces, one of them existing outside of the museological display and the other one inside. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of those pieces as, I will just search it again real quick, as sort of half pedestal and half vitrine. And so that's why I was working with the plexiglass or the acrylic sheeting, was that I really wanted to play with that inside-outside relationship. And so a lot of those pieces have a kind of interior form and an exterior one, or more often they're sort of half in and half out of the pedestals. So this is like my studio kind of in total. That's my funny little cottage door. So I have some work that's just like up, drying in various stages. That's not fired. And then it goes all the way outside. That's my house. I really like having some outdoor workspace. And then I have a even weirder bedroom up to my studio. So I have right now, as probably a lot of people, of greenware that I don't have the capacity to fire myself. So that is one of the things going on.
Did you say that those two vessels or the work that was on the left, is that unfired right now as well?
This one?
No,
No,
the one
that
by the
one?
gate, that one,
Yes.
yeah. Wow.
That is unfired, partly because I'm like not very optimistic about it making the long journey to a kiln.
To a kiln.
Yeah, they're conjoined, so it's it's a very fragile piece, and actually they don't stand on their own; they're points, which is so a thing I've been doing. So these are probably I can unwrap these. These are probably destined to also become pieces with those sort of like pedestal, vitrine pedestal things, acrylic ones. And these ones I've been playing with kind of like busting the ceramics open, and in that opening, in that break, kind of twisting them into shell forms.
Oh, wow.
So these will feel more like vessels in the end. They'll get little handles and stuff, but they'll also have this kind of like shell-like quality. And I'm just kind of, I have maybe some finished, but again, green in the back.
Yeah. And you know, Cammie, I think when you go into your back room,
you
you lose
guys?
a little bit of reception. A little bit.
Did I lose you? Okay, sorry.
A little bit for a second.
So that's what I'm like actively working on right now. And then also I'm making like 1 million porcelain points to be adhered to a piece later. So that's a good mindless task I can do when like the current reality is too overwhelming.
Actually, we have a question from Holly Jerger, and she was asking where do you often fire your pieces?
I've been a resident at Long Beach for like a year and a half. For a long time. And so I was doing all of my firing there, and they've been amazing. Sorry, I'm trying to like balance again. I lost my zhuzh. So they've been amazing, but I'm not a resident there anymore, and I don't really know is the real answer. Got to figure that out.
If Tony logs in or Chris.
Yeah. Hey guys.
Yeah.
Remember me? Yeah. You know, they've been super supportive and probably would let me, if I was in a real pinch, fire something, but I should figure out a longer term solution. One day I may actually buy my own kiln, but I probably, I don't know. Now, like maybe when you can ship things again and go places, then it might affect.
So we actually had a question along those lines of sort of like both like the points that you were doing in porcelain, and then these kind of like ideas about like the domestic and access and stuff like that. Let's see. Somebody had asked us what your studio looks like, which you just already showed us. So thank you. Let's see. Yeah. So kind of like talking a little bit about sort of like creative flow and all these things that have been happening with sort of like with both sort of like the political climate and the social climate. How has the kind of this mandated stay at home, has it changed your workflow or your creative kind of like output, would you say?
It honestly hasn't changed all that much. I am extremely lucky to have a studio behind my house, and I have never been so grateful for that scenario, that situation. So I can just walk out my back door. This is actually, I showed you my studio. This is like what I'm looking at right now is a magical fairy tree that's like right outside my little dwarf cabin. Snow White is what I was looking for. My little Snow White cabin door. Anyway, so I'm extremely
Cammie
lucky.
and the 7 pots.
I'll have way more than 7 by the end of this quarantine. So I'm super lucky that it hasn't changed my life more. I actually have been like having earlier nights and stuff. Marty, my partner, who's also an artist, has been home for dinner every night, which is not our normal routine. We often sort of each work till very late in our respective studios. So I've been sort of shutting up shop and cooking, which has been really nice to get a gratification that's a little bit more instant than my very slow process. But otherwise, it really hasn't changed much. Except, I mean, obviously, I'm not doing anything else. You know, there's that.
Right. And I think somebody just commented, Michael, best tree in LA.
I kind of agree. It's a really good tree.
Speaking of trees, I noticed that you have a lot of kind of like greenery in your studio, which is really, really nice.
I'm trying to train it, like, you know, and I would do that, right? I want to control it. I'm trying to, I can flip back around, or maybe you can even like just see behind me. So I'm trying to train some plants to climb the walls.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So these are sort of
like those are trainees?
Experiments. These are my trainees, and I have those kind of plants also, which is another new thing that's been happening.
Yeah, I did notice a little sketch behind some of the stuff that you had been doing with the.
Oh yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that's it's been a project that I've been working on for years at this point, but I'm just starting to like finally see in real life and have the ability to make, which has been very rewarding. That's what that is at least related to what the Guggenheim stuff was with too.
Oh, right. And I have some of my trainees here, although I kind of feel that lately they've been the one training me on how to ward them.
And also just how to like turn towards the sun as we are like almost as stationary as our houseplants these days.
It's true. Let's see. What other questions that we had that were coming in? Oh, this one. Where do you see yourself as an artist in 5 years?
I hope I have a kiln. Or another.
And you've trained your plants.
And that I've trained my plants. Yeah, I hope that I do figure out that that sort of self-sufficiency of making my bigger and less wieldy. Very little of my work is very wieldy, but some of it is especially ungainly. And figuring out a sort of system for that. I had actually just started looking for a bigger studio potentially in like February, and for the moment extremely glad that I didn't find one. But that's a big one on the agenda right now. I mean, of course, I hope I do all kinds of other things. I hope that my work can like leave this coast more often.
Let's see. Oh, and actually somebody just asked about the terrarium slash fish tank. They're saying that it looks very cool.
Thank you. It is. It's a real sneak peek there.
I know, totally.
I have not been letting people in on that one much.
So whatever you saw, and you'll see some more in the upcoming 5 years.
I hope it doesn't take that long at this point. I did recently just post an image of it, but that's work I'm really excited about. I'm again thinking, and it actually predated the. In its ideation, at least, predated the pedestal vitrine pieces that I was referencing before, and that you are showing a couple of in the ceramic biennial. But I feel like those pieces are sort of a mediator between work I had been doing before and these aquarium pieces, which are also sort of hybrids of like a vitrine aquarium. So yeah,
that's great. And you posted an image recently of this?
I did, but it's ambiguous, like most things.
Oh, cool.
Most things I do.
So if any of you are curious, you can go see the ambiguous image. Let's see, what else do we have? Somebody was asking. Let's see, what else is somebody asking? Is there an ecosystem for firing larger pieces in Los Angeles? Interesting. Is there an ecosystem for firing larger pieces in Los Angeles?
There is in some ways, like the Ceramics Contemporary, or the Center for Contemporary Ceramics. Those words in some order. Which is at Cal State Long Beach, has been very generous, not only with me, but with a lot of local artists about inviting people to come make work there and make really big stuff. They have their biggest kiln. I was working right next to their biggest kiln, and I think it's like 14 feet at its apex or something. It's huge. And so they have a great capacity. In general, a lot of teaching institutions that have ceramic programs have the best capabilities. But other people, I mean, John Mason, when he was alive and working, he had built, apparently, I never saw it myself, a kiln room, a walk-in room in his warehouse studio that where he fired his monumental pieces. So, people figure it out. Yeah. And some people just own
it's true.
big kilns. There's that too.
It's true. It's true. And somebody said that cut off, and it was in Alex Miller was mentioning where that was, and it was just in Southern California, or it was said to have been in Southern California, right?
John Mason's? It was in downtown LA, actually.
In downtown LA. Oh wow,
yeah.
Amazing. And another thing that which kind of reminded me a little bit of John Mason's work was a lot of artists do kind of take the strategy of segments or components in order to create larger works.
Yes.
Which also kind of reminded me of some of those. That's okay. Which reminded me
plugging in
some of those larger like totemic pieces that you were doing, where it was kind of like components of in order to create kind of a larger work, which is can also be a system to work in.
Definitely. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways around it. Either making your work differently, like that. But there are also big kilns. I also, like my first, the very first big sculpture I made, which was for my 2015 show with Francois Gab project that you need a bigger kiln than you usually use, or something, something in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was one more question, and then maybe we can start wrapping up a little bit.
Okay.
And it's from Golden Cricket. Hey, another CalArts alum here. It's where I took my first ceramics classes. What did you study there? That's actually really, really interesting. The first ceramics class would be at CalArts.
Yeah, yeah, they have ceramics now. They did not when I was there. So I'm
and shout out, actually a couple of shout outs to Jackie at CalArts, and also shout out to the folks up at Cal State Long Beach. And I also wanted to give out a shout out and a thank you to Shulamit, to your gallery, who's been really helpful in kind of helping us kind of get the work into the exhibition and extending the exhibition and all that stuff. And
they're great. And I think we were all happy to be as accommodating as possible, given the life-changing world events. But what did I study there? That's a funny question from a CalArts alum, because I studied art in the art program because they don't make the finer distinctions that some schools do, which I fully appreciate. I feel like, especially I went from an MFA, and especially at that level, I think a lot of art practices are not easily categorizable into a single discipline. So that's true. Despite the fact that I make almost exclusively sculpture myself. But maybe they meant, who did I study with?
Maybe, yeah.
In which case, I split my, what do they call it?
The independent studies, or?
Well, the thesis advisor, basically.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, whatever CalArts calls it, which I'm blanking on at the moment. I actually had two. I had Martin Curcells and Charles Gaines. And I continue to have a very close relationship with Charles Gaines. I managed his studio for several years after leaving CalArts. And I worked a lot with Leslie Dick and Tom Lawson and Michael Ned-Holte, and there's lots of good folks there.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much, Cammie. I kind of, one of the last things was was talking a little bit, as we wrap up, talking a little bit about the future, any things that you might have coming up. I know it's difficult to talk about the future in such an uncertain time.
Yeah, I'm still planning on having 2 solo shows this year, but who knows? I am planning, because you can't not plan for it. But yeah, I have a show that opens pretty soon, like in June, I think, at the Lux Art Institute in outside of San Diego, and then we'll hopefully have a show with Shula in the fall, but that might get pushed to the next year because things are getting pushed. But yeah, I have stuff going on, and have lots of work that I was sort of in the middle of when things got shut down that I haven't been able to complete until other people go back to work too, you know, like that get fabricated elements. But I'm plugging away at the stuff that I do in my studio. So
Okay.
I don't know which part of that
Yeah.
the question meant.
Yeah. I think all of them. Well, thank you so much, Cammie, and thank you to everybody that joined us today. I don't know if you had any last comments or anything
I
to
see
share
a
with
lot of
us.
friends there. So hi, friends. Um, no, I mean, thank you for doing the show and for being flexible and creative about your approach to it as the world has changed.
Totally. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Y'all can check out our catalog. It's still on sale on our shop website, so you could always order that if you want to check out a little bit more about the exhibition. And we're going to continue trying really hard to continue giving platforms to the artists that are in our show and that we work with the museum. And thank you for being here. And thank y'all.